Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello to the audience. We start with press conference. Will be held on German. Aber wir haben eine Übersetzung. Bitte, wer Kopfhörer benötigt für die simultane
We have interpretation. Please use headphones if you need the simultaneous interpretation. You can find the headphones here on the chairs. You have one for English and two for German. Those are the channels. I would like to give a warm welcome to the Federal Minister, Steffi Lemke, and our special guest today,
Mrs. Inga Anderson, Executive Director of the United Environment Program from Nairobi. Welcome. Thank you. Wir werden starten mit einem Statement von Frau Lemke heute zum Nature Day.
of Steffi Lemke, of Minister Lemke, here on Nature Day of the COP28. And then we have a statement from UNEP Director Anderson. And then, of course, we will open up the floor for questions and answers. You can ask your questions in both English and German, and you will receive, of course, an answer and the corresponding interpretation. So, I would like to wish you a wonderful afternoon. Of course, I am extremely happy that COP28, for the first time, is organizing a Nature Day. And tomorrow we're going to have an Ocean Day. For me, this means that we, as in a global community, are finally understanding how closely connected the climate crisis and the environmental crisis are connected, and that we cannot solve one without solving the other. As you know, this climate conference is entering its final stretch. We still haven't reached the post. We have, of course, a lot of controversial points, especially regarding fossil fuels, but we did start in a very positive way with the launch of the Loss and Damage Fund, which, of course, was the source of heated debate. But it is extremely important to create trust in developing countries, to create adaptation and mitigation measures. We need to achieve this balance because Germany was able to pledge 100 million euros, and the United Arab Emirates also pledged 100 million euros. And right now, this fund, which is extremely important, has been growing and growing thanks to the pledges of many, many countries. But of course, we know that no insurance company, we know that no government of this world, and we know that no fund in this world can compensate for the damages of the climate crisis. We cannot solve this problem merely with money. We need to prevent, we need to stabilize our ecosystems. We need to also mitigate against those consequences of the climate crisis that can no longer be prevented. We, as a Ministry for the Environment, have a strategy on climate foreign policy, and we have made this clear. We know that the crisis is a triple crisis: climate crisis, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And this doesn't leave us enough time to find solutions. That's why we have to act quickly. There is extreme pressure here at this meeting at COP28. This is a very large meeting with very many countries meeting, and that is why we have to deliver solutions as quickly as possible. In all three areas that I mentioned, we see that the problems are increasing. The challenges are enormous. And that is why, together with mitigation and the reduction of CO2 emissions, we have to deal with other problems. We have to stabilize our global water cycles, we have to stabilize our oceans, and we have to stabilize our ecosystems. That is why I have a clear message as a minister. We need a very clear final declaration at this COP. we need to translate this declaration into concrete solutions as well. My ministry sees itself as a ministry of solutions. And that is why, with our action plan for nature based climate action, we have started to take the first steps in the direction of nature based solutions. So, in this context, I am extremely pleased that you are here with us, Inger. We have worked together very closely already with, of course, the United Nations Environment Program. And the fact that we have this joint press conference is a clear sign of that. And the fact that we're also preparing the UNIA 6, and that will also bear significant fruits, hopefully, towards a global treaty that will reduce plastic pollution at a global level. So, just to end my statement, I would like to state the concrete goals of my ministry. You know that many federal ministries are here on the part of the German government. Of course, again, we want to strengthen the role of nature-based climate action, and we want to set that forth in the final declaration. We want the global community to recognize the importance of nature-based solutions. This is not a symbolic aspect. This is not something that is nice to have. This is something that we must work on. And at an international and national level, we're working on this. With United Arab Emirates, we have established a new program to protect the mangroves. This is a trilateral cooperation program. This is one clear example of how strong countries or powerful countries can help other countries to find nature-based solutions and to translate them into concrete measures. The second aspect I would like to mention is that we have a lot of untapped climate mitigation potential. For example, circular economy and higher efficiency. We want to set this forth in the final declaration as well. We are working on a national circular economy strategy in Germany, but also at an international level, we would like to work more in this area. That is why I'm very pleased that at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, we were able to have a common meeting between the IPCC and the International Resource Program. In third place, for protecting the oceans, we want to make sure that at a global level, international, we work more in terms of the oceans. We have achieved, of course, as you know, the BBNJ High Seas Treaty to start protecting the oceans in a better way. We hope that this will be ratified at a European and a global level. And again, as I said, we're working towards a global plastics treaty, and hopefully this will be finalized in 2024. We know that without the oceans, we wouldn't have any oxygen. Oceans, they store the greatest portion of heat that is building up in our atmosphere, and that's why we have to continue to protect our oceans so they can assume this function. Thank you. Now I would like to give you the word, Inger. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much to Minister Lemke. I have to say that we from the United Nations Environment Program are incredibly enriched by your leadership and by that of Germany, leading on climate, leaning in on biodiversity amazingly, and also on chemicals. It's only a few months ago that the Global Chemical Agreement was gavelled in Bonn, and so that leadership is something that we celebrate. Minister, you spoke of this triple planetary crisis, the crisis of climate change, the crisis of nature and biodiversity loss, and the crisis of pollution. And what I think Minister highlighted is exactly that these are not separate things. When we address the nature loss crisis, we are helping ourselves on resilience as well as on adaptation and, of course, on mitigation. When we address pollution and waste, especially chemicals and so on, we are helping biodiversity. And if those chemicals that we are addressing are fertilizers, well then nitrous oxides is a powerful non-CO2 gas that has significant greenhouse gas impacts, and therefore the whole thing is interconnected. It is very, very positive that we have this Nature Day here at this COP. You know, in Glasgow, we began to lift it In Egypt, we lifted it a little bit more, and now it has arrived. And we do thank voices like yours, Minister Lemke, for being so powerful. We understand, and UNEP's emissions gap report bears this out, that right now our current policies do take us to a 3-degree world in 2100. If we add the NDCs that we worked so hard to create, it takes us to a 2.9-degree world in 2100. If we add the conditional NDCs, which are conditional upon finance, it takes us to a 2.5-degree world in 2100. All is not lost because we are stretching, and the next set of NDCs will have to be even more ambitious. And this is where the nature agenda can come in. Investing is nature, and is investing in ourselves and investing our own security. Investing in nature and smart city design is ensuring that our urban dwellers will not get flooded. Investing in nature and coastal ecosystems, be it mangroves, coastal forests, sand dune protection, etc., breaks the wind and ensures that our coastal zones are kept safe. Investing in nature invests in food security for our people. In Montreal, we agreed on the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Agreement. In that agreement, we had a number of critical targets. Yes, we agreed of 30% being set aside, of 30% terrestrial, 30% ocean being set aside for and under active conservation by 2030. We also agreed that we would have 30% under active restoration by 2030. But importantly, we also agreed that we would reduce by half the toxic sludge that we put into our waste, our environment by half by 2030, and we agreed that we would ensure that that we would reduce zoonotic diseases, and of course that we would halve the introduction of invasive species. We have just come from the combined ministerials of NDCs, National Determined Contributions, I think everyone knows, and the NBSAP, the National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans. These two documents need to talk to each other. I, of course, say so does the pollution reduction document, and we will work to make it so. I have to celebrate the leadership of Germany by, on the very first day, putting a significant amount of money on the table to ensure that the loss and damage fund could get going and operationalized. Had it not been for that, I think that powerful momentum we are now seeing with the 100 million that Germany put on the table was absolutely critical. Nature-based solutions is part of the solution package that Germany has long, and German people, I should say, have long celebrated. Germany, like my own country, just a little to the north, Denmark, are countries where we really have a strong legacy of enjoying our nature and of protecting it. And so nature-based solutions, I think our citizens understand. And the more we invest in nature, frankly, we are investing in the future and indeed ourselves. So what I will say here is finally maybe, when we look at zoonosis and diseases that emerge into the human population, be it Ebola, be it malaria, be it Zika, be it the Marburg, and be it other zoonoses, we understand that the One Health dimension is an important issue as well. And again here, I want to pay tribute to Germany because you have also been on the forefront of that and put significant resources available for us to understand that diseases are no longer just, if I have it, you don't have it. We are a global society, and therefore ensuring that we invest in protection of nature so that we live with healthy nature, so that we do not have wild markets, so that when we do have bush meat, I live in Nairobi, as you said, that this is handled in a very sanitary way so that we can prevent invasive parasitic and viral diseases into the human population. That is part and parcel of what we are talking about here. Really, Madam Minister, thank you for your leadership, and thanks to Germany and the German people behind the government for supporting the strong green agenda. Thank you.
Vielen Dank Ihnen beiden. Es ist wieder klar geworden, dass
Thank you very much. Thank you to the two of you. And it has become clear that biodiversity and the protection of the oceans and nature-based solutions, they are not the icing on the cake, but they are the livelihood for all of us and for our planet. And this is a topic that is now being addressed here at COP, and not only on the fringes, but it is at the core. And this has become clear in your statements as well. And I would like to thank you very much to the two of you, and now you have the floor for your questions. Ms. Ibling, please.
Susanne Elleding from the Tagesspiegel. I would like to know, Minister Lemke, you said that it would be wonderful if this would be set forth in the final declaration of the COP, nature-based solutions, but what happens after that? This is just the final declaration. What happens afterwards? What will happen, for example, at the next COP, at the next conference of the parties? What will be negotiated? How can we make this even more binding? Yes, I want to make clear that this is not the beginning of our work in translating our biodiversity goals into, of course, reality. We have the global framework from Montreal. We have the BMUV COP, as you know. And many countries are already working on implementing this, and they have been doing so for a long time. With our national biodiversity strategies, we have, beyond our national biodiversity program, we have started to implement this into the reality. So there are many, again, partnerships. I mentioned the Mangrove Alliance. That is one of the areas where we are working together at an international level with, again, climate action and environmental protection at the same time. And as you know, in the Amazon, in the rainforest in Congo, there are programs that are also similar. So again, to make sure that this connection between climate and nature is clear, we have to make this clear, and we have already done so to a significant degree. And then our global goals to restabilize nature and to reduce carbon, of course, and CO2, then that will be able to be one of the concrete goals at the next COP. Also, in terms of the national circular economy strategy, we will hopefully be able to integrate this into a declaration of the next COP. I'm a climate reporter.
Emphasizing all the benefits from investing in nature. So maybe you can explain us a little bit. I mean, investing means money in the end. So maybe you can elaborate on whether new money has been pledged here at this COP and how you want to generate the necessary funds. And Frau Lemke, das Gleiche für Deutschland. Vielleicht erklären Sie uns schnell, wie viel Geld.
For Germany, so maybe you can just explain how much money Germany is willing to invest in nature-based solutions and whether this start has been made.
In Glasgow, we promised that we would double the adaptation finance, and adaptation finance is invariably very often green finance, if I can put it this way, not necessarily gray, hard infrastructure. We promised that we would double it from 20 billion to 40 billion. The UNEP adaptation, which we are about to reach for. The adaptation gap report, however, that we issued just a couple of weeks ago, highlights that we need between $150 to $350 billion a year to make this happen. So the question is, where will that come from? Because it'll obviously not necessarily come from public resources. The interesting part is that the payback for the community investments, for the national investment, for the private sector investments is, I think, more and more well understood. If we plan smart cities and don't just build in the floodplains, but use the the lower lying areas in the cities for parks. It's good for people. It's good for inundations when the water floods. It's good for recharge of the aquifer, because if we pave it over, it just goes right into the oceans, and there's no absorption into the aquifers. If we invest in smart coastal forests, those forests break the winds and protect whatever is behind. If we invest in mangroves, etc. And we are seeing more and more communities, actually just people power, stepping up and making many of these things happen in their communities. You may have heard about some of the restoration initiatives that we have seen, for example, in Kenya. They are going to plant billions of trees. In Ethiopia, the same thing. In Rwanda, the same thing. Yes, there's development finance associated, but there's a lot of community involvement. So while I'm not suggesting by any stretch of the imagination that community muscle alone can make this happen, I don't want to be naive, what we are seeing is a real movement that is beginning to lift. At the same time, where you have commercial and or hard infrastructure on the coast, it's becoming clearer and clearer to insurance companies that investing in smart nature-based solutions on the coast brings down the insurance costs. And so you are seeing more and more of that, where the private sector can see that. And finally, I would say with UNEP Finance Initiative, which you may be aware of, that convenes banks as well as asset holders and a forum for insurers, we are seeing that we launched together with others the Task Force for Nature-Based Disclosures. As you will know, we then launched the formal disclosure regime for investors at the stock market in New York Stock Exchange in September of this year, encouraging companies, a little bit like the Task Force for Climate-Related Disclosures, encouraging companies to disclose what kind of investments they have that are nature negative, but also nature positive. And we are seeing more and more investors taking that on. Thank you.
Ergänze vielleicht noch für die internationale Ebene.
So maybe just an addition for the international level. So even though you asked me about our national contribution at the UN General Assembly in New York in September, so we decided on the Global Fund on the biodiversity financing. Germany was the first country to pledge money, and then we created an alliance with other countries, and this meant that the financial instrument, by which I mean the global biodiversity framework that we decided upon in Montreal, could be finalized and then be launched. Our Federal Chancellor Scholz said that 6 billion euros will be invested from the German side, and we also had 1.5 billion euros for the biodiversity fund starting in 2025, and the 6 billion euros, and I'm sure that we're not yet at the final calculation period, but I think that we've already implemented that, and it is about distinguishing between climate action and so nature-based solutions, but actually that doesn't really make sense, because when you invest into nature-based solutions, then you are investing in climate action as well, and the other way around. And this means that we have a triple benefit, in fact. With regard to our national funding instruments, we have pledged 4 billion euros for nature-based solutions by 2024. And by 2027, I'm sorry, and this is going to be financed by KTF, and then we haven't gone further than the pledging, but we have everything in place by 2028, but in 2029, then we will see what we can continue doing, because the negotiations on that will start only next year. But what I can see is that people are becoming more and more aware that we need to do adaptations to our climate change that we see, and that we need to protect against floods as well as against droughts. And this is a program which is a a nature-based solution, but also has an impact on climate action and mitigation of the impact of climate change and the ecological impacts that ecologists can understand very well. I mean, they are also now understandable by more and more people, and this is what I'm hoping for. And in Germany, I always receive questions whether these 4 billion euros for the nature-based solutions wouldn't be enough, because there are 100 billion euros that is as a special budget for the military and for building ships too. But I believe that it is very important that we institutionalize this type of funding, and that this is something that is going to work in the medium and even in the long run. So because it is not about building a factory in the short term, but it is about ensuring that we have long-term funding for nature so that nature can protect us. And this is a program that we have just initiated, and we are gradually building it up, and we know that this is the federal system that we have in Germany. So we are working together with the federal states and also across the borders of the federal states. But this is something new, something novel, and this is very good that we are thinking about medium and long-term perspectives nonetheless. Thank you very much, Clara Pfeffer, RTL. So I have another question for you, Ms. Lemke, about what is going on in the European Union. It is about artificial intelligence and the regulation there. So, and what do you think of that? And are people protected well through that?
I cannot make a statement. As you see, there was an agreement at a European level, but I don't know this. I haven't been able to analyze the results yet, so I cannot give you a statement. I hope I can, I hope you can understand. Thank you.
Hi, Anneli Moran from Göteborgs-Posten in Sweden. I just have a question. There have been a lot of discussion. Sorry, louder. There has been a lot of discussions about nuclear power. So I'm just wondering which role should nuclear power play in solving the climate crisis in Germany and the EU and globally, do you think?
Sie wissen vermutlicherweise, dass Deutschland.
You may know that Germany in April this year has phased out nuclear energy for now this year, and we have switched off the last nuclear plants that were still running. And this was a decision that was taken by the previous government, that is by the conservative CDU government. And this was a consensus that we have among the democratic parties all over Germany to phase out nuclear energy. Some people are questioning it now, and from my point of view, I mean, this has to do with party policies and not with energy policy aspects, but this was a decision that we have taken in Germany, and we have implemented it. We are not fostering nuclear energy because it is very expensive, and actually the long-term effects have not been, and the long-term problems have not been resolved anywhere in the world, and the question of final storage is very expensive and is very complicated, and we have an alternative in renewable energy sources, and this will take us into an area without fossil fuel and fossil energy sources, but every country decides on their energy sources themselves. And I have become aware now that many countries here have decided to introduce nuclear power into their energy mix more and more. But the reality in the past showed that the share of the nuclear energy has actually declined rather than increased in the past few years. And this is also what we can see in reality, what energy sources will prevail at a global scale. In Germany, we have taken a clear decision.
Points, just to say that today about 15% of the world's power is provided by nuclear, and we are seeing, as Madam Minister said, a number of countries leaning into that power source. The share of electricity obviously varies widely by country to country. Let's recall how expensive it is to build a nuclear power plant. Let's recall how long time it takes and compare that with the renewable options. You will find invariably that wind, solar, geothermal and hydro are significantly faster, even though some of those are still some time consuming to build. And let's also be aware that from our perspective, yes, IPCC does take into account nuclear as part of one option track. I realize that but in poor countries that are battling energy poverty and access, getting urgent and affordable and not be loaded with debt is an important dimension. So the long lead time for nuclear is important. I also think it's critical that when one embarks on that, I'm sure that the neighbors to that country would like to have government stability and peace and security in such a manner that whatever fissile material is not lost or unaccounted for. And obviously a robust rule of law would be a thing that we from the United Nations Environment Programme would wish to see. And these are the elements that would send much of the global south maybe not in that direction because of its expense, the longevity and the complexity around it, but rather to the more affordable, immediate solutions that are now on the table. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Zita Sebesvári from United Nations University. Our institute is in Bonn in Germany. So nature is cross-cutting across the many UNFCCC topics, also loss and damage, and also the global goal and adaptation. I just was curious because in terms of non-economic losses and damages, we don't know much about biodiversity and ecosystem services, what is going lost, and if there is a planned investment in more research, more knowledge generation in these areas, and if you probably have a word about the role of nature and ecosystems in the global goal on adaptation. Thank you so much.
We know that if nature isn't stable, then we have no possibility of ensuring that people have enough food to eat. So food security is affected by this. Also, the soils are also affected by this. And so the loss of biodiversity is one of the 5 largest threats to humanity at the moment. That was established 2 years ago. This shows clearly that biodiversity also has an economic aspect that is being more clearly recognized. We have to protect nature due to this as well. And if we have stable ecosystems, then we will also be able to prepare more fully for the changes that are coming our way. So again, everything that we invest in nature-based solutions is a good investment.
I'll just say that the UNEP Adaptation Gap Report, which is a full report, I'm not going to spend time on going through the numbers here, actually lays out a lot of the benefits that will be derived from investments in adaptation derived back to biodiversity. And I think the indivisibility of benefits between one and the other is very given. It's correct that looking at the private sector investment return becomes quite site-specific. Is it a coffee farm that has a return on biodiversity as well as return on the product that they are producing, etc.? And so at times it gets quite specific to the crop, etc. But what we are understanding is that the manner in which we produce our food and our products has to be such that it cannot be at the expense of biodiversity. We are at this point losing a massive amount of high forests or tropical forests, be it in the Borneo Mekong basin, be it in the Congo basin, or be it in the Amazon basin. Each of these will endanger us all. We are seeing the fringes of the Amazon already on the tipping point towards savanna. This is not good for anyone. And so those kind of investments are absolutely critical. And I think what we see in leaders like President Lula is a realization that investing in nature is not only the right thing to do nationally, but it will also have to yield international benefits and support. And I do think that there's been a lot of rallying around the presidents who have stood up and made the right decision. Recently, I attended a conference in Congo-Brazzaville precisely on the Congo Basin, and again here leaders from that sub-region, well knowing that there are minerals and gold and whatever else under the forests, are calling for a stoppage of the deforestation precisely because these countries without the forests will not sustain. Thank you.
Andreas Stamm, ZDF German Television. A question to you,
And
Ms. Anderson. We recently filmed in Pakistan. It's a UNEP-sponsored program. It's glacier lakes and the threat when they burst for the population. So classic adaptation. And it seems that adaptation is massively on the back foot here at this COP. And why is that? And what do you make out of this?
Trying to recall whether it's Article 9, but somebody quickly give me a thumbs up of the, or is it Article 5 of the Paris Accord says that finance for adaptation and for mitigation must be in balance. And I think there is, so does it mean a dollar for a dollar, or does it mean that it has to be in balance? To be discussed. However, what is a fact is that investments in adaptation have been woefully inadequate. And the longer we have climate procrastinated and not done the mitigation that is necessary, the higher the adaptation bill has become. These invoices that nature sends us in the form of catastrophes are just coming more frequently and with a higher total cost. Therefore, yes, I think adaptation is increasingly, and we from UNEP with our adaptation gap report have continued for a number of years to shine a light on this. But you are right, and I too visited Pakistan after the devastating floods of 2022 and saw with my own eyes what was happening. And so I think that there is an understanding that this bill, either we get it in adaptation, which is sort of a preventive investments, or we get it with a higher dollar amount associated with it in loss and damage. Pick your poison. The point is that we need to invest in adaptation expeditiously. The Green Climate Fund is very much aware of it. In my conversations with the presidents of the various development banks, World Bank, African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, I think there is a growing awareness around this, but you're right, it's insufficient. We say that the Glasgow promise of doubling from 20 to 40 billion is nowhere near enough. We need to see between 150 to 350 billion a year into adaptation.
Vielen Dank. Gibt es noch weitere Fragen?
Further questions? Yes, there's one more question there in the back.
Thank you. Yvonne Brandenberg from AFP. Ms. Anderson, I just wanted to ask, you already mentioned the UNEP emissions gap report. In the light of this report, would you like to make an appeal to those who are opposing fossil fuels phase out here?
You know, I've said throughout, and I'm sure Minister will come in on this point as well, I don't get into prepositions. I echo my boss, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who has been very, very clear. There is no future for fossil fuels. We have to decarbonize our societies. No more new coal power plants. It is not about abated, unabated. It is about getting a future that is clear and does not create the very fact of pulling the carpet from under our existential feet here. So I would, and if I can add, it's a little ironic. We are in year 29, because we skipped a year due to COVID. 29 years, a baby born 29 years ago can be a politician standing on a podium today. The point here is 29 years, and today we are having a discussion whether the very cause of this crisis is something we should stop doing. I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank Ihnen beiden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lemke, Ms. Anderson. If you have any further questions, I'm Andreas Köppler. I am the head of press at the Ministry of Berlin, so you can reach us at our office of the delegation. Before you leave, I would like to show you two films on nature-based solutions. This is natural protection and climate protection, as we say in German, or climate action. Those are two terms where many people ask themselves, what is it all about? And so we've tried to explain this in these two short films. And I think the connection between the climate and nature is shown very clearly, and we show very clearly why nature-based solutions are fundamental, because we are trying to address existential threats. So please, roll film.
Nature works for us non-stop. We work for nature, strengthening nature for a better climate. Nature works for us non-stop. We work for nature, strengthening nature for a better climate. Nature works for us non-stop. We work for nature, strengthening nature for a better climate. Nature works for us non-stop. We work for nature, strengthening nature for a better climate. Nature works for us non-stop. We work for nature, strengthening nature for a better climate. Nature works for us non-stop. We work for nature, strengthening nature for a better climate. Nature works for us non-stop. We work for nature, strengthening nature for a better climate. Nature works for us non-stop. We work for nature, strengthening nature for a better climate.